Making decisions is an important part of our lives. In fact, the current state of our lives at this very moment is a result of the decisions that we have made or the decisions that we have not made in the past. And of course, the consequences of those decisions made and the indecisions. So, decisions are so important. Now, this video is for you if you struggle with making decisions, if you are always second guessing yourself, or you are always analyzing to the point that you end up not making decisions at all, or you end up making the wrong decision, this video is for you. And in this video, I'm going to be walking us through a step-by-step guide on how you can make decisions. So if you're excited about this video, I want you to like it, and let's get right into the video. When it comes to making decisions, the first thing which I believe is important is clarity. You need to be clear about what the problem is and what solution you are trying to achieve, or what goal you are trying to achieve. So, what is the problem? Can you say it in like a sentence and say that this is the problem I'm facing? Because there are several people that maybe they want to, let's say, quit their job and cannot say in clear terms why they want to quit their job. Now, there are reasons, but they are not clear about it. And the reason for that is emotions. So maybe something happened at work, someone spoke to them anyhow, maybe a boss, or they are not just satisfied with the amount of money they are earning from that job. But they are not clear about those reasons. But what is the driving force behind them wanting to make a decision is actually the emotions that have come out of certain things that have happened. I'm telling you that most wrong decisions are actually a product of emotions, are actually made emotionally. So you need to be clear, what exactly is the problem I'm trying to solve? In fact, you need to be clear also if it is actually a problem, or it is me just taking something serious that I'm not supposed to take serious. So, can you define the problem in clear terms? And can you determine or define the result or the outcome that you want to have from the decisions that you want to make? The second step is something that I believe is very important also. After you have been able to define the problem that you are trying to solve and the result you are trying to get to, I think the next thing is for us to ask ourselves, what are our values? So ask yourself, what's your value? By values, I mean, what are those things that are non negotiable for you? For example, a value that someone may have, or someone should, I rather say, have, is doing things that are legal, right? You don't want to do something illegal. So if you are faced with decisions to make, your value is to always stay on the right side of the law. Now, that can be a value. It can be maybe a religious value. It could be honesty. It could be like, I don't want to do anything where I have to lie or something like that. So, what are your values? And you start to define your values, or after you start to define your values, it's from there you start to make decisions. Now, this has to be before you start to make decisions, because you don't want to be emotional about the decisions that you are considering. You want to set out, or you want to declare about your values, the things that are most important to you, before you even start to consider options. And it is based on those values that you start to know, even right off the bat, the options that you are never going to consider, and the ones that are more appealing to you, or the ones that are actually even options. Because for me, anything that does not stick with my values, I don't even consider it an option, to be honest. So, what are the real options you have? You settle it from your values. What are those things that are non negotiable to the kind of person you are, or the kind of person you want to be? The next step is to gather information. You gather as much information as is necessary. Now, we have to be careful here so that we wouldn't get into analysis paralysis, right? I have a video on this channel on overthinking. You may want to watch that video also, so that while getting information or even analyzing information, you don't get yourself into overthinking, or what in that video I called analysis paralysis. But back to the point, you will need to gather as much information as is necessary. Now, you can't get all information in the world about it. Just get the ones that you can lay your hands on, and from that information, or from the information that you have, you can start to make your decisions. There are several ways we can get information. You can check the internet. You can, I mean, you use AI probably, but also you can, I think the best way is to ask someone that has been in your situation before. Maybe a mentor, maybe someone you look up to, could be your parents, could be an elderly person, could be your pastor or your religious leader. Ask someone that you believe has more experience than you, and gather information from the person. After you've gathered information, then you start to ask yourself, what are the implications of each of these options that are before me? And by the implications, I mean, what are the short term implications and what are the long term implications of each of those decisions? Now, I want you to consider the long term implications of decisions more. I'm telling you that it's a fact that most of the best decisions are decisions that considered more the long term implication and less the short term implication. There are decisions that you make that you feel good at the moment, but in the long run is going to hurt you. For example, decisions to have a bad diet, for example, to eat things that you are not supposed to eat. You enjoy it in the short run, you enjoy the taste, or you have a nice time with friends, but in the long run you are not going to like it. Decisions to buy certain things, for example, maybe buying a house that you don't need, or a car that you don't need, or spending a lot of money on a wedding that you are not supposed to spend so much money on, or several other decisions, right? Ask yourself, what's the short term implication of each of these decisions, and you consider that less than the long term implication. So you have to consider both. I'm not saying do not consider the short term implication, right? You have to consider that. For example, if you are saying you want to make a decision on leaving your job, right? You have to think about the short term implication. Okay, if I leave my job today, what am I going to eat tomorrow? How am I going to pay my rent? How long can I survive before the business I'm trying to start becomes successful, right? So, how am I going to survive in the interim? Am I going to pack into my parents' house? Am I going to, or do I have savings? So, you think about the short term implication, because if you do not do that, the long term implication will just end up being a good night's dream, right? It will never come to pass, because if you don't, for example, decide what you are going to eat, how are you going to run a business? If you don't decide maybe the clothes you are going to wear, or things that you are, how you are going to take care of yourself, how are you going to even run a business? But at the end of the day, the most important decisions are made, or the best decisions are made considering the long term implication more than the short term implication, even though you will consider both. So ask yourself, what are the short term implications and long term implications, and put priority more on the long term implications. The next thing I want you to consider is for you to understand that you actually need to make a decision. In fact, I would say that indecision on its own is a decision in and of itself. Just that indecision is the most dangerous decision you can ever take. Just to ignore the problem or to ignore the situation. Even if your decision would have been to be patient, maybe your decision could have been to not do anything, but you had, or you have, to make that decision to do nothing, right? You cannot just ignore the problem. You have to go through the process and look at everything I've mentioned, your values, your what exactly is the problem, what do you want to achieve. Go through the entire process and make a decision to do nothing. That is still being on the safer side rather than just ignoring the entire decision process altogether. So you have to make a decision actively. So indecision in and of itself is a decision, and it is the most dangerous decision that you can make. So, and many times when people resort to indecision, it's usually because of fear. So I would like you to flip the question sometimes. Instead of asking yourself, what if I fail? Ask yourself, what if I do not make a decision? And that is the most important thing to consider. What if you fail? You don't really know. You may fail, you may not fail, right? But what if you do not make a decision? What are the things that you stand to lose by just ignoring the situation or by maintaining the status quo? When you look at it that way, you start to realize that regret actually comes mostly from not putting in the effort, not trying at all. Regret most of the time does not come from failure. Regret comes a lot from not making a decision. So you will regret not making a decision, but if you eventually fail, at least you'll be able to say that I put in the effort, I did something about it. It did not work, but I tried my best, right? But you will always regret not making any decision. Once you've considered all these things, then it's time for you to decide. You have to be bold enough to actually decide and act on the decision that you have made. You need to be bold enough. Of course, you may end up failing, right? You may end up realizing that you made the wrong decision. But most of the time, even though you realize that you made the wrong decision, you would have learned more making the wrong decision than making no decision at all. So be bold enough, consider your options, know exactly what you want, what you are running away from, and what you want to get. Consider your values, consider, get as much information as possible, and make the decision. Be bold enough, take the steps, take the actions that will lead you to your goal. Even if you fail, you know that you tried. And even if you fail, you can, most of the time, you can always correct yourself. The truth is that most decisions are not irreversible. Now, there are irreversible decisions that you need to be more careful with. But most of the time, decisions are not irreversible. You can always pivot and change your direction later. And when you are going to do that, you would have learned a lot more than you would have if you just did nothing. After you've made your decision, you've acted on it. After some time, you want to look back at that decision and ask yourself, what were the things I did? What worked? What did not work? Are there things that I'm supposed to improve? Are there things that I'm supposed to change? And that way you can always grow. So in this video, we've looked at some steps that you can take when you are confused and you need to make a certain decision. If you like the video, I want you to click on the like button, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and share this video with other people. Thank you very much. And till the next video, make sure you just get things done. Bye.